We're glad that you are here today as we continue this journey in the book of Exodus. So it's confession time as we get started. How many of you ever made a lame excuse for not showing up to work? Lame excuse for not showing up to work. How many of you ever have called in, confession time, this is church. How many of you ever called in sick to not show up at work and you weren't really sick? Okay, these are the liars among us. I'm just kidding. Forgiven liars. By the way, I'm sick of work is not a real excuse for calling in sick. I know that's been used. Surveys say that over 35% of workers have called in sick for work who are not really sick. They just didn't want to go to work. This is a list of actual excuses that people have given for not coming in to work. I ate too much birthday cake. The ozone in the air flattened my tires. My llama is sick. Same. I'm experiencing stress from seeing a large spider in my house, so I'm not coming. I am bowling the game of my life, and I can't make it in to work. My roots are showing, so I'm not be able to come. I know there's a few guys in here that have used that excuse. My pressure cooker exploded. I can't come to work. I had to testify against a drug dealer, and the dealer's friends beat me up, so I'm not going to be able to make it. I used a chemical hair remover under my arms, and my pits are now burned. I'm not going to be able to make it. I accidentally ate cat food instead of tuna, and I am deathly ill. And then those are all legitimate excuses that people have used, and this is one that many people have used now that we're not going to laugh about, but it's a legitimate excuse. I got the corona. That's the excuse that people use for not showing up at work. A legitimate excuse, by the way, for not showing up at work. Sometimes we just have to laugh about it. Today we are talking about Moses, a man who made some excuses to God. We are at the burning bush. This was part 1 last week. If you didn't hear part 1, go back and listen to part 1. I don't have a lot of time to bring you up to speed today, but Moses is in a dialogue with God. Moses, who is this Hebrew baby turned Egyptian prince, turned failed rescuer, turned fugitive, turned aging shepherd, who is on the backside of the desert in this conversation with God. And God has said to him, I am sending you to set my people free from Egypt. And Moses is a reluctant convert, to borrow the term that C.S. Lewis often used about himself. A reluctant convert. Now, we might think that Moses would skip with joy all the way back to from Mount Horeb to the palace of Pharaoh himself with this good news. But not so fast. Moses is more, in our text, kind of a pouting child than he is this courageous deliverer. Moses has some questions. He has some excuses, 5 of them nonetheless. And God has some declarations, not necessarily answers for Moses, but some declarations that have less to do with Moses and more to do with God and who God is. By the way, you guys are throwing me off some because some of you are just like not sitting where you normally sit. So if I act a little confused today, that's why. Chapter 3 and verse 10, we'll pick up from the last verse from last week. That'll give us a segue into this week. Verse 10 of 3. Come, this is God speaking from the burning bush. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Verse 12. But he said, but I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt. You shall serve God on this mountain. So the mountain where Moses is having this experience, the Israelites would one day revisit. I mentioned that last week, that Horeb is another name for Sinai, which is a monumental place in the Exodus story. So Moses' response to God is, "Who am I? Who am I?" And God's response to Moses is, "It's not about you. I will be with you." So Moses says, "Who am I?" God says, "I will be with you." It's not about you. This first excuse is kind of a lack of confidence from Moses. So from the start of this dialogue, Moses feels less than qualified for this task. Like, who am I to be the one? Now, scholars kind of just, have a couple of opinions here what's going on. It's either some serious self-doubt from Moses, like I feel very inadequate, or could be a true sign of humility, like Moses is saying, like, who am I to do this? Like, I'm incapable of doing this. And this does seem to be like a reasonable question in light of the circumstances, right? God saying to Moses, "I'm going to use you to set the people of Israel free. Who am I to do this?" is a legitimate question in this moment. I mean, what God's asking Moses to do is a God-sized task. And so Moses saying, "Who am I?" seems to be a legitimate question. Moses feels very incompetent. He feels incapable. "Have you seen my resume, God? I'm a fugitive. I'm a blue-collar worker. I'm a shepherd now for 40 years. I've tried this before and failed. I'm aging." Moses is like 80 years old at this point. Like, who am I to pull this off? I mean, this is the equivalent of, an average blue-collar working construction worker showing up at the White House with his hammer saying to the president, like, "Let's go take China, I'm ready," right? That's what we got here. We have Moses, blue-collar, aging shepherd, backside of the desert, God saying, "I'm going to use you to set my people free. I'm going to use you to deliver my people." Hold up, God, I got corona, right? I mean, it's excuse time. Who am I? And God's reply in this text, in these verses we just read, have like two key components. First is presence. I will be with you. I will be with you, God's presence. And also God's promise. When the people are brought out of Israel, you will worship again on this mountain. So we have the presence of God. Moses, "I'll be with you." And we have this promise of God. Hey, look, I'm telling you, you're going to stand on this mountain again one day, but for a different reason. You're going to stand here to serve, to worship me on this mountain. Now, notice here, God does not cater to Moses, does he? He doesn't cater to his low self-esteem. He doesn't give him a self-help pep talk. He doesn't take him to Barnes & Noble, to the latest, inspirational self-help book. He does not tell him how awesome he is. "Moses, you got this. I know you're feeling a little down. I know you're complaining about being 80. I know you can't see as well, hear a little well. My wife's been on me because I'm approaching the big 50. And she's like, all you do is complain about your physical condition now." I'm like, "What? Can you say that again?" God doesn't cater to Moses. No self-esteem pep talk here. No, go listen to the latest guru. This is not a pregame, right, ramp up Moses rally talk. He doesn't tell him how awesome he is. Moses says, "God, who am I? I can't do this." And God says, "You're right, you can't. I'm doing this. And I will be with you," and that changes everything. So, who am I? Well, it's not about you. I will be with you, God says. Verse 13. Moses has got more to say. Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" Moses' second excuse is not just who am I, but like, "God, who are you? Who are you, God? Who sent me?" And we'll see God's response is simple. It's, "I am." That's who I am. I am. Who sent me? I am. Sent you. We'll see in just a moment. So this second excuse is less about confidence and more about content. Who do I say sent me? What shall I say to them when they ask? Now remember, Moses has no qualifications here. Like, why would they follow me? I tried liberation before and I failed. My plan was terrible. I took out one taskmaster. I couldn't even get that part right. Tried to bury the guy in the desert and it was all exposed. Pharaoh came after me. Like, I've tried this once, God, and I have failed. And there's some other factors going on here too. Remember, the Israelites have been in Egypt now for 400 years. So they've been crying out to God. They've been wondering, where is God? God's been behind the scenes. So the question, like, who am I going to say sent me is a legitimate question when you've been 400 years with God removed. They're also in a culture in Egypt that is filled with all kinds of gods. And so for Moses to say, who am I going to say sent me, there's a lot of things going on here. And so Moses says, look, when they ask, and they will ask, because my credibility is zero, and it's been 400 years, who do I say sent me? And God's answer is one of the most discussed verses in all of the Old Testament. Verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent you. I am who I am. Now, whatever your English translation says here, it's a little bit inadequate. Like we can't get in our English translations here to the full thrust of what God is saying in these few words. Like this is beyond what our human words, human minds can completely digest when God says, I am who I am. The idea is that God stands as this eternal now. That God is always, He always is. He's not a God who was. He's not a God who will be something different. He is the sovereign creator, God, sustainer of all things, even the creator and sustainer of time. He is not a has-been. He is not a will be. He is the eternal is, the great I am. He is. And so whatever time and space limits that we have, that we can only think in this space, this time, what's my next moment going to hold, my next day, my next week, my next year. We can only think and digest and process things as time-space creatures because we are time-space creatures. That's what we are. That's the only way we can think about things. And God stands above time as the eternal now. He sees everything as if it were right now, from beginning to end. He is the eternal is, the great I am, the I am of all, right? And so God says, you tell them that I am who I am. I am beyond time. I am beyond what you can comprehend. I am beyond time, beyond space. I am the great I am. And so that's why, like, our English translations can't really nail this. Like, to understand how big God is in a few words, we can't fully get it. God breaks it down even a little further for Moses. He says, like, you tell them the great I am sent them. God also said to Moses 15, say this to the people of Israel. The Lord, and according to, again, your translation here, this is the Hebrew word Yahweh, the Hebrew name for God. The Lord is probably in your English translation in all caps. That's usually when you see all caps Lord, the translation of the Hebrew word Yahweh. I am the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. He's unchanging. And thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. God says, you want to know who sent you? I am Yahweh. Again, Hebrew name for the eternal God, that He is the God of the patriarchs. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I'm this covenant-keeping, promise-keeping God. I am the one and only true God. We'll see when God gives Moses the law and the commandments, at the heart of all of that in the book of Deuteronomy is that I am the one and true and only God. That there's only one God and I am Him. I am the eternal God. I am the God of the Hebrews. I am the creator God. I am forever God. Nothing will change that I am God. That's who sent you. This eternal God. So God is leaving no doubt in Moses' mind about who he is. I am Yahweh. I am the great I am, the God of the patriarchs, the God you have heard about, the God you have learned about as a boy, is the God who is speaking to you from this burning bush, the God who is calling you. And Moses, I will be with you. This God, this eternal God, the great I am, will be with you. He is above us. And yet, he is among us. I will be with you. Well, I mean, we're talking about pregame locker room pep talk, right? God's not catering to Moses' self-esteem here, but God's saying, look, it's not about lifting up Moses, somehow making him feel better about himself. A lot better about himself. I am Yahweh, and I will be with you. Like Moses should be charged right now, ready to go. But he's got more. God's going to kind of give the clef notes to Moses here. Verse 16, go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt. We talked about that last week. I will come down. I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, right, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. It's like the understatement of the day, compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor and any woman who lives in her house for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. And you shall put them on your sons and your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. So God again kind of gives Moses this overview of what's going to happen. I've heard the cries of my people, and now it's time for me to act. I'm going to set my people free. And Pharaoh's not going to be happy about it. And he's not going to cooperate willingly, God says. But that's okay, because God is the great I am. He's Yahweh. He controls all of creation, even the hearts of kings. It's not the persuasive oratory skills of Moses that's going to convince Pharaoh to set the people free. It's God. Exodus is about God. And God will display his power by unleashing, we'll learn, 10 plagues on Egypt. And Pharaoh, the text simply says, will be compelled. Now that's a small word to describe what happens. It'll be more than compelled. But Pharaoh's going to be compelled to set the people free. I like how God just like throws in this bonus that the Israelites will not leave empty-handed. That God is like tossing in a shopping spree. Like, you're going to go to the Egyptians and ask for gold and silver and jewelry and clothing, and they're just going to give it to you. Like, not only are you leaving, but I'm throwing in a shopping spree. You get silver, you get gold, you get clothing. Can we say God goes all Oprah here? Is that too much? That's too much. Comparing God to Oprah is too much. They're leaving with stuff, God says, because I'm in control. Again, sounds like a plan with which Moses should be able to get on board. I'm in. Verse 1, chapter 4, Moses answered, hold up, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. Moses, you've been on the backside of the desert too long. You've been gone. You're seeing things. Moses says, they will not listen to me. They will not believe me. And God says, they'll listen to me. They will listen to me. Excuse 3 is kind of this lack of credibility. Why would they listen to me? Why would they believe me? So God provides Moses a show and tell preview of what's going to come. He gives him 3 signs. So let's look briefly at the significance of these 3 signs, which all involve God changing something into something else. So verse 2, the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses, being a natural human, like every human should be in this moment, runs from it. Runs from the serpent. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. Not wise advice, by the way, picking up a snake. I'm not saying God's not giving wise advice, you know what I'm saying. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, has appeared to you. So, first sign, staff turned snake turned staff. Now, you need to know in the context here that Pharaoh donned a kind of ready-to-strike cobra on his headdress. It was very common for pharaohs to have symbols of serpents everywhere, particular cobra snakes. And archaeology has discovered the role of the snake in ancient Egypt. And it symbolized supreme authority and power in Egypt. There's some deep symbolism going on in this story. Moses flees at the sight of the serpent in fear. Now think about, this is an experienced shepherd who lived in the desert with his sheep. I mean, snakes are not uncommon for him, right? He's probably dealt with snakes all the time. But at this snake, Moses runs. He flees. So that lets us know something's going on here. We don't know exactly what. We could speculate. Maybe this is a cobra, which is a, very venomous, lethal snake. And maybe Moses does the smart thing and runs. But there's some deep stuff going on here. It's no mistake, again, that God has Moses turn the staff into a serpent. And whatever type of serpent it is a serpent with which Moses identifies Egypt. And so Moses is not just running from a snake. He's running from Egypt. Like, he don't want to go back to Egypt. He left Egypt. He's a fugitive from Egypt. He doesn't want to stand before Pharaoh again. And then God says to him, pick it up by the tail. Reach out and grab it by the tail. Now, I don't know a lot about catching snakes. I'm not like a snake catcher. We have a few show up at our house usually every year, and my strategy is kind of like get the garden rake or hoe or something and just kind of get it back in the woods and hope Toby doesn't drag it back into the yard after I got it in there. Or snap a picture and send it to our resident in-house snake person and say, is this thing going to kill me? And if the answer is no, you're good, then I'll kind of shoo it out into the woods. That's my experience with snakes. I do know, though I don't know a lot about catching snakes, not like Jeff Corwin here. I do know you don't reach out and grab the sucker by the tail. Not a good move, right? God says, pick it up by the tail, and he does, and it turns back into a staff. What's the point of this? The point is, God has absolute authority over Pharaoh. Everything that snake represents in this moment, God says, I'm over Pharaoh. I'm in charge. He's not in charge. He doesn't have absolute authority. I do. There's an allusion here back to Genesis chapter 3 when God cursed the serpent. And God says to the serpent, representing Satan, when he says, hey, there's coming a day when the seed of the woman will stomp the head of the serpent. Remember that? There's an allusion here to that. Where God's saying the serpent doesn't win. I win. Now, we know that's a big picture, and then the end of all this, Satan doesn't win, that God's in control. But in this moment, this time, Pharaoh doesn't win. He's not in charge. God is. Pick him up by the tail. I will crush the head of the serpent. Verse 6. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he put it in his hand inside the cloak. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous or diseased like snow. Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside, I'm assuming very quickly. And he put his hand back inside the cloak. And when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Egyptians invested heavily, financially and time, in disease study to try and figure out leprosy and other type diseases that were very deadly in that time. Guess what? No success figuring it out. Lots of time, lots of money investing in the study of infectious diseases to no avail. God says, put your hand inside your coat, pull it out. Sickly. All right, what am I doing with this? Back inside the coat, very quickly. Back out. Fresh hand. What's God saying? I'm in charge. I have absolute authority over disease, over sickness. I make the unclean clean. Pharaoh's not in charge. Egypt doesn't run the show. I'm in charge, Moses, and I'll be with you. Verse 9, sign number 3. We'll see this one again when we get to the Exodus itself. God says, if they will not believe even these 2 signs or listen to your voice, you shall take water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Now, we'll dive into this when we get into when Moses is actually in Egypt and turns the water into blood, but just a point to drop into your skull right now before we get there. Like, the water only turns into blood when it hits the ground. It's not Moses being like, all right, what we got here, is it blood yet? Is it blood yet? I'm not pouring this out till I know there's blood in there, because I'm going to look like a fool if it doesn't. God's like, pour it out, pour the water out, and on the ground it will be blood. Same thing that he'll see when he stands before Pharaoh and says, I'm turning this water into blood. The Nile was the life soul, the life force of Egypt. It symbolized the power and supremacy of Egypt. It symbolized the power of the Egyptian gods. I told you when they put baby Moses when they told him to throw the Hebrew children into the Nile, it was kind of Pharaoh's backhanded way of saying, I'm murdering all these kids, but I'm blaming it on the Egyptian gods. If they live or die in the river, that's up to the gods. And so that's what they believed about the Nile, that it had this divine, supernatural power about it. Then God says here, I'll tell you about absolute power. I will display absolute power over the Nile itself. And all these signs demonstrate God's complete sovereign power and authority over Pharaoh, over Egypt. Pharaoh is not in control. Pharaoh is not all-powerful. Pharaoh is not in charge. Pharaoh is not Lord over creation. Pharaoh is a mere mortal to Yahweh God. Now, listen, this is important. These signs are not parlor tricks. These are not sleight-of-hand tricks to make the crowd ooh and ah. God's not a street magician on the streets of Las Vegas. These are not parlor tricks. When Moses stands before Pharaoh, he does so in the absolute and complete and sovereign power and authority of the great I Am, whose power will be on full display. Again, Moses should be like, I'm in. Sign my name on the line. Verse 10. But, seems to be a common word in this dialogue. But Moses said to the Lord, Oh my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you've spoken to your servant. Right? Burning bush hasn't changed my crassness. I'm slow of speech and of tongue. And the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth, by the way? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord says? I hear some sarcasm here. I told you sarcasm is a spiritual gift. Now therefore go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Moses says, God, I do not have the right skill set. God says, Moses, you have exactly what I gave you, which is everything you need. I gifted you. Moses' excuse is a lack of communication skills. I don't have the right gifts. I don't have the right abilities. I'm not any more eloquent than I was when this whole thing started. God says, can you remind me? Who made your mouth? Who makes mouths to speak and eyes to see? Who makes the deaf to hear? Like, who made your mouth? Moses, I will be your mouth. I will tell you what to say. As we've been going through Exodus, I've been rereading the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And one thing we see again and again and again after the Israelites make it into the desert in the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy again and again, you see in the text, then God said to Moses, tell them. Then God said to Moses, here's what you say. Then God said to Moses, let them know. Again and again, it's God who is speaking and Moses who is simply the mouthpiece of God. This is not about Moses, it's about God. Excuse after excuse after excuse is countered by not how great Moses is, but how great God is. Again, I'm in. Sign me up. And then Moses comes out with kind of the true, what's happening behind the scenes here. But he said, verse 13, oh my Lord, please send someone else. Like, God, I don't want to go. Just cut to the chase here. I don't want to go. Verse 14, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he's coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people. He shall be your mouth. You shall be as God to him, and take in your hand, I like how this ends, take in your hand the staff with which you shall do the signs. Moses says, God, I don't want to go. Send someone else. God says, you're not going alone. You're not going alone. God doesn't say, I get that. Let me rethink this whole thing. God's like, you're going. But you're not going alone. There's just, last excuse here is just a lack of commitment, right? I just don't want to go. And the Bible says the anger of God is kindled against him. Here's what that means. God is saying, I'm positioning, I'm equipping, I'm enabling you to fulfill your calling. I am with you. Now, get your staff and take it with you. That's kind of an anticlimactic ending, right? Get your stick and go. But don't forget, God will use this ordinary, mundane, unimportant shepherd's staff in the hands of Moses to demonstrate his supreme power and to bring about the most historic rescue in all of Old Testament history. Now, there's so much in these verses, but I want to just end by talking about just a couple of common struggles that surface here that God speaks to in the life of Moses and to our lives. And the first struggle here is the struggle of the I. And I don't mean I like C-I. I mean the letter I, the struggle of I. And kind of the question that goes with this is like, which I is the focus of my attention? You see, I tend to be like Moses on Mount Horeb. I tend to be focused on the wrong I. Who am I? Who am I? God. My focus tends to be on my lack of abilities, my wants, my past, my desires, my insecurities, my reluctance. And God responds, take your eyes off of you and put your eyes on the great I am. God refocuses, right? Take your eyes off of me and get your eyes on Him, the great I am. Now, this struggle tends to play itself out as an identity struggle because we tend to answer that question a lot of different ways. Who am I? And that's an identity question. Who am I? And our tendency is to answer that question with our identifying marks. I am a husband. I am a father. I am an employee. I am a manager of a certain group of people. I am a pastor at City Church. We tend to focus it on those I's. Who am I? And those identifying marks. Or we tend to focus it on what we own or what we do. I live in this house, my kids play these sports, I work this job, I make this amount of money, or I don't make this amount of money. Like, we tend to take that question and turn it internally and allow that question to define us. I am this, I am that, I own this, I have that, I drive this vehicle, I enjoy this sport, I am a fan of this team. We answer that question by how we tend to define ourselves. And we tend to try and define ourselves and find our identity most often outside of Jesus. And everything I just mentioned, even my role as a husband, father, employee, right? Employer, or a manager, or a pastor, all of those things that I tend to define myself by, all those things I own, all those things I do that tend to answer that question for me, they can be taken from me in a moment's time. That's our reality. In a moment's time, I can no longer be a husband. In a moment's time, right? I could lose the role of father, as tragic as that would be. In a moment's time, that could be taken from me. In a moment's time, I could no longer be employed. In a moment's time, I could no longer be the pastor of this church. In a moment's time, whatever it is I define myself by, a house, a car, a bank account, a vacation, a sports team, a child playing sports, in a moment's time, all of that can be stripped from me. And that's why the gospel pushes us to find our identity in the great I am, in who He is. Because God says, I am inexhaustible. I am unchanging. I am all-powerful. I am caring and patient and faithful and merciful and sufficient. I am capable. I am more than enough for you, and I am with you. So in which I do I find my identity? In me or in the great I am? I am His. You see, if I find my identity in Him, when things are stripped from me, as painful as they may be, as hurtful as they may be, it doesn't shake or change the core of who I am, because I belong to Him. I am His. He is my identity, first and foremost. The struggle of I. It's a real one, right? What about the struggle of the call, right? There's a call on Moses' life here. And the reluctance of Moses is grounded in a genuine concern for his lack of abilities and his outright stubbornness. Like, these are flaws that we might not expect in Israel's greatest leader and deliverer. Like Moses' struggles here, these are not things you're going to find in modern leadership books on how to lead big organizations or lead yourself. These are not things that we would expect to find in the most recognized leader in all of the Old Testament. I'm not joking when I say that. Like, Moses had a connection to God, a relationship to God that is unlike any other person in the Old Testament. and we find these flaws in him. And constantly the Scripture provides the real life struggle of following the call of God. Scripture is filled with these examples. Abraham, Joshua, Gideon, Samuel, Jonah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the disciples, and on and on and on and on the list can go. And what we discover is that in each one of these situations are, listen, ordinary people who are filled with honest feelings of inadequacy, of reluctance, questions and doubts, insecurities, rebellion. I mean, think about Jonah. He's like, I'm going the other way. Humility, fear. And yet over and over again, God does not chide them. He does not punish these leaders for their human responses. Instead, God equips them and He prepares them for the task ahead, not by reminding them how great they are, but by reminding them how great He is. That He is in control, that He is merciful and patient even with the reluctant. Even when God grows angry with Moses here, it's not because Moses gave one too many excuses to God. It's not like, all right, I was okay with 4, but now excuse number 5, just push me over the edge, Moses. You're out of here. It's not why God's angry. He's angry because in this moment, Moses refuses to rest in who God is. God is saying, I'm enough for you, Moses. I am enough for you. Rest in me. I will be with you. If you're a parent, you get this. You get as you're trying to help your child figure out something and you want to enable and equip them and you have all the tools and skills necessary to help them in these moments, and their response is like, back it up. I can help you. Back it up. I got this. And your frustration sets in, right? I have the skills to help you here, and I'm with you. I'm in your corner. I'm in your favor. The point here is God is greater than our inadequacies. His omnipotence is greater than my incompetence. His strength is made perfect in my weakness. We are imperfect messengers, and that is why we rest in Jesus. Jesus responded to the call of the Father in perfect obedience. Even in his most intense moments of struggle, he leaned into the Heavenly Father. He rested in his provision. And that's why Jesus and not Moses is the perfect rescuer. And when we are called to a task, a calling, He is faithful to do His work in us and through us in spite of us. Flashback to Philippians series. He who started a good work in you will be faithful to complete it, to see it through. What God is calling us to is a position of trust. Will I trust Him? Will I rest in Him? And then this is the last one I'll end with. The struggle of ordinary. The struggle of being ordinary. We are reminded, I love this, we are reminded from this text, it is okay to be average. You hear me? It's okay to be average. It's okay to be ordinary. Here's where we get right down to the brass tacks. God's call for most of us is found in the ordinary and mundane. Here's what I mean by that. God's call for most of us, for you, for me, God's call for us to be faithful. You know where it's at? Home, work, school, in my neighborhood, in my community, in my church family. This struggle takes place in the everyday. The call to the ordinary, the struggle of the ordinary. Listen, more than likely, God is not calling you to lead 1 million people through the desert. It's not God's call on most of our lives. Let me just put it right real for us. We will live and die, and no one's naming a building after us. You get that? They're not naming a stadium after you. You're not going to have your name on the field. And that's okay. That's okay. Because that's probably not God's call for you. It's not Moses. It's not lead my children out of Egypt. What God is calling you to do is to be a faithful, gospel-focused, Jesus-following father, mother, son, daughter, spouse, friend, witness, co-worker, boss, laborer. Following Jesus in the ordinary lanes of life. That's our call. In the ordinary. And here's what is so amazing to me about this. As we live in the path of the ordinary, the mundane, the everyday, as we live in the ordinary, we are promised by the great I Am, I will be with you. What? The great I Am, the creator and sustainer of the world, the God who brought his people out of Egypt, the God of Moses, he will be with us. He is above us, and yet he is with us. Our identity is found in who he is. And here it is. And that's what makes your ordinary, listen, extraordinary. Not because they're going to name a building after you. What makes your ordinary extraordinary is because the God of the universe is with you. He's with you in the everyday of life, promising his comfort, giving you the credentials that you need to live out God's call on your life. This may be the most important statement I make in this message. The value of your call is not dictated by the size of your impact. You hear me? The value of your call, God's call on your life, is a spouse, a parent, a faithful worker, a witness for Jesus in our community, a faithful part of the body of Christ at City Church. The value of your call is not measured by the size of your impact. There will be people that God uses to impact millions of people, thousands of people, hundreds of people, dozens of people. It's probably not most of us. The value of your call is, am I being faithful to do what God's called me to do right here, right now, in the ordinary lanes of life? Excuses times 5, right? Moses, who am I? What do I tell them? What if they do not believe me? I don't have the right skill set. Send someone else. And in response, God makes a statement. I am who I am, and I will be with you. So stop making excuses and focus on me. Because I am all you need, and I am with you. I stole this from somebody else, but I'm going to use it for you guys. Let's say that we were in London together. When Kaylee was studying abroad, Ash and I had the opportunity to go to London and visit her. And part of our trip was to go to Buckingham Palace, where the Queen resides part-time. So let's say I showed up at the gates of Buckingham Palace and knocked on the giant gate. And a guard approaches, says, "May I help you?" "Yes, I'm here to see the Queen. And by the way, while I'm here, in the palace. I just want to look around a little bit, hang out, sample the tea. It's my pinky up. Still just brown hot water. Stole that joke too. Can I just hang out for a while? Who are you? Well, I'm Devin Hudson. I'm from Caddo. If you didn't know. Access denied, right? You're not coming in, not meeting the queen. You're not hanging out. You have no rights, no authority, no access. You are fully and completely denied. Back away from the gate before we call one of our cool little cars to come pick you up. You know who does have access right now to the palace? A lady, a young lady right now with the name Kate Middleton. As a matter of fact, her title is Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cambridge. She's got access. Now, you know when she did not have access? She's a teenager growing up in an upper middle class family. She could have gone to the gate, knocked on the gate, and said, I am Kate Middleton, and I'm here to see the queen. I just want to hang out for a while, sip some of the tea, taste some of the snacks, maybe run around, check out a few of the bedrooms. You know what they would have said to her? Access denied. We don't even know who you are. Now, she has full access. You know why she has full access? She has full access because she is married to Prince William. And when she married Prince William, Kate Middleton just says, I'm with him. I belong to him. I'm with him. Guess what? Full access granted. Hang out. Hang out with the queen. Drink the dingy, nasty tea. Eat the hard, crusty bread. All the stuff that you do in London. You have full and complete permission and access to do whatever you want because you are with him. Full access, full privileges. You see where I'm going with this, right? He is with me. That changes everything. Full access, full privileges, because the Creator God, the Sustainer God of the world, the great I am, Yahweh, is with me. And that changes everything about life. No matter what I approach, no matter what I'm facing, I'm going through, the suffering, the pain, the ups and downs, the uncertainty, He is with me. And that changes everything because He is the great I am. I'm not, but He is. He is the great I am, and He is with me. And that changes everything about life.